Okay, I'm reviewing one that I didn't like. I don't think I'll forget it, but who knows. So, I have finally finished The 7 Habits of Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. This has taken me so long, so very long. Arguably, it's taken me since 2007 when I was first given this paperback. I tried to read it a number of times back then. I never got very far. It's like probably I got about this far in, and I just kind of lose interest. There wasn't anything much about it that I really enjoyed. I just slow down, finally I'd give up. So arguably I've been reading this for what, 15 years? Oh, scary. I finally got through it not by reading the paperback, but by reading the audiobook. I felt kind of obligated to read the paperback because it was a gift and they had good intentions, I'm sure. But yeah, so I finished the audiobook. And I probably wouldn't have finished it without the audiobook because the narration was excellent. It's narrated by the author himself, and clearly he understands his topic very well. You can tell when a narrator doesn't know the topic very well, they don't put the emphasis quite right, it just jars a bit, but here the emphasis was perfect, and his passion for his subject matter is clearly enough that he has dedicated his life to it and written at least 300 or so pages about it. The only thing about the audiobook that I didn't really rate highly was at the beginning of each chapter or section or something, you had this female voice going, yeah, at you. She was singing in tune, I'm not, but it wasn't any less annoying on repetition. Anyhow, it was short at least. Now, did I get anything out of this book? I almost certainly did, because a motivated person could get something from anything they read. You can probably get something from a hair curler commercial if you were interested enough, and I'm sure that Stephen R. Covey would agree with me about that. I would probably have got more out of it, however, if a few things in my life, rather than in the book, were different. A, if I worked in a standard corporate style white collar business world, or if I came from Stephen's very evident kind of background. I have worked for a large company, but I was technical rather than white collar, and a lot of the motivations, businessy type attitudes go for any large company. But if you're more office based, this is probably better for you. Kind of background. Stephen obviously comes from a very middle class American, Christian, nuclear family centric lifestyle. He brushes down the Christian side by calling it Judeo-Christian, which is fair enough. It was written in 97, so it was 10 years old already, even 2007 when I got it. In 97, calling it Judeo-Christian was probably being more politically correct, and maybe skips the danger that you might get of someone going, oh, this is Christian lifestyle. I don't know. The kind of nuclear family centric lifestyle he describes is not only alien to me, it's alien to pretty much all of my friends and all of our lifestyles. So it was interesting hearing about it, but it was interesting and fiction feeling rather than real feeling. I'm not saying that his examples wouldn't work for a nuclear family. I'm not saying they aren't a good idea. I'm not saying that if I was reading a fiction book of a family that was doing these things, I wouldn't go, hey, that's a good family, but it would be fiction for me. It wouldn't be relevant to my lifestyle. So most of the behaviours and thought patterns that are being promoted here are described in terms of business or nuclear family. So many examples about him and his wife and kids, and it sounds like they have a very cute, very idealized American lifestyle. I'm glad it's working for them, but that's not everybody's life, and this is often by design. I don't want to be a white picket fence American housewife. I probably could have been that if I wanted it. I don't want to make my whole life giving seminars. Oh God, no. about how to be effective in the workplace. I've gone to a few seminars. I've never looked at the person on that podium telling you to pair up with a stranger in the room and do an exercise. I've never looked at them and go, wow, I really want to do that. So yeah. Anyway, something else I didn't much like was the author's opinions on natural law and principles are universal and underlying. That was weird. And I totally disagree with everything that he said on those things, by the way. Well, his worldview is his worldview. You might agree with him. In many ways, your worldview is very far from underlying the whole of humanity. I'm just saying. And while this motivational book might work for anyone, if they take some things out of it, reading it can be a bit wince-inducing if you're not from this background. And by the way, you can call it Judeo-Christian all you like, but that personal ethic framework of yours comes from your Lord Jesus Christ, and you admit it. So that's Christian, and that's far, far from underlying all of humanity, or even the majority of humanity. Now, I would also have got more from this book around about the time it was written and originally published. So it must have been written in the late 80s, and the late 80s and early 90s, very early 90s, were when I had my little whirl of self-improvement seminars, exercises, stuff. And a lot of this book is very similar to any other self-improvement, effective worth style, lifestyle guru of the same era. So nothing in it seemed startlingly different to me, or even really all that unique, except for the strong business inflections. I never went for those ones. It had a lot of good reminders about attitude, about speaking to people, and my jobs are all about speaking to people. So there was a lot there that was relevant. It was mostly reminders rather than new thoughts. But yeah, not bad. I would have got a lot more. I would have got so much more out of this if he had stopped talking about how humans were so much better than animals. He uses animals as examples of what bad behavior is all the time. And this man knows nothing about zoology and nothing about ethnology, animal behavior, anything. He comes clearly from that medieval church concept worldview about how all animals are a metaphor for the worst about humanity and how we need to overcome our animal nature in order to be good humans. Have you noticed that he annoyed me with this? You might have. Anyway, completely ignoring the fact that the worst things on earth are done by humans, not animals, and often to animals and other humans. That being the case, having several rants per chapter about how he thinks the things are animal put my back up every chapter, all the time. He is convinced that humans are the only animal that he can think, and he needs to read up on the literature, and he needed to read up on the literature in the 90s as well, because we already had a vast body of work on animal ethnology by World War II. World War II scientists knew more about the topic he's talking about than he does. He appears to have no notion that animals lie, which is well documented, develop and execute behavioural strategies on a regular basis, build and use tools. Crows in New Caledonia I saw recently, for example. Well, they're just one example, a very well documented one. They have complex social structures, many mate for life, some species entirely mate for life, which, if humans want to admire that behaviour, they should stop dissing swans, for example. So cringeworthy to hear him using animals for an example for everything that is bad in the world. It's like, oh, man. And he did it so much. So much. So, while animals are foul and beneath contempt, the author appears to have boundless admiration for the Egyptian Anwar Sadat. As the man who broke the Geneva Convention, raised the prices of basic goods in his country to the point where it caused starvation and widespread hardship, leading to internal rioting, major injuries, massive destruction, and eventually, I believe, assassination. So, animals are foul and worthless, but Anwar Sadat is someone that he really respects. So Stephen and me have got some differences in the way we see the world, shall we say. Okay, I think it came to 784 minutes or so, and at the end of those 784 minutes, I could not really list what the 7 habits he's talking about are. I remember having the same problem with the paperback. I think you have them in, oh yes, you have them in headings. So habit 5 is seek first to understand, then be understood. Okay, but having put it on the chapter heading, I don't think it runs through the narrative very strongly, or it gets lost and swallowed in all the descriptions of how him and his wife do talk to each other. Not sure about that. I think too many examples of white-collar business and nuclear family hide and bury the actual message that he's trying to get across chapter by chapter. All the examples of communication, like I said earlier, they were all good examples as long as he stayed away from zoology and minimized his wife Sandra. All good, but there were a lot of words vaguely tacked onto the concepts, and so not a lot of practicality. Later in the book, he has an exercise you can do about perceptions of you by people around you. It was similar to other ones I'd done back in the day. So I did the funeral exercise. And from it, I can only conclude that his life and society are vastly different to my life and society, and that furthermore, I am deeply happy by that fact. Yeah, I won't say any more about that exercise. Early on, he's on about perception. I'm sure nearly everyone out there is aware of this image and how it can be an old crone or a young woman. That's the sort of thing he goes into, and he's got more diagrams in here, like I said, effective habits. He's describing them in the audiobook doesn't work as well as seeing them in the actual book, but there's nothing particularly new about them, so I think you can get away with just the audiobook if you want to. It's more entertaining, for certain. I am very, very glad to have finally finished this book. I can't fully recommend it. I think it'll work for some people. But I do think there are better books and better programs to apply directly to business dealings. And the man needs to stay away from zoology. I've got to say, one of the things that really annoyed me about this was at the end, he talks about, since it had been published a long time ago, he was once asked if he would update anything in it, and he says, no, I would not update a single thing. And that, to me, implies arrogance and a lack of recognition of the fact that there are a lot of faults in this book that could have been corrected quite easily. Yes, I don't think I'll forget this book, but I may forget what I thought about it. It might be one of those books that I look at, not on my shelf, I'm giving this away the second I can, but look at it on someone else's shelf and go, yeah, I remember I didn't much like it, I don't remember why. All those reasons are the reasons why.